Hello everybody, it's Heath Robinson with Topaz Labs here. Excited to welcome back the one and only Harold Davis. It's been about a year since we've seen him. Harold, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, everyone. My name's Harold Davis. I'm a photographer and writer, and I'm really happy to have you all here today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a very fast slideshow and give some ideas about how to use the wonderful Topaz software in an overview form. And then without taking too much time on generalities, I want to get to show you some ideas. Some ideas of how to use the actual filters and actual examples. So homeopathy, it's a system of medicine that treats a disease by giving a little bit of the poison that's involved. And my thought for you about working with filters is that sometimes what you want to do is you want to have a small amount of whatever it is that you're using and not the whole amount. So if you have a filter, maybe it doesn't look so great at 100% opacity, but at 20% opacity, it looks absolutely wonderful. So part of the secret of using the wonderful Topaz presets is to use only a pinch. That's one idea for you. Another idea is to use go in two directions. If you're going to make something sharper, also make it less sharper selectively at the same time. So without too much further ado, I'm going to run through a few images that I've created using these techniques, and then I'm going to start to show you some examples. One piece of software that I'm really excited about from Topaz is their AI Gigapixel program, which lets me enlarge images so that I can make really large prints from them, and also take an image where there's one piece of the image that's all that I want and blow that up. I've used quite a few programs that interpolate software up to make larger copies, including what's in Photoshop and including genuine fractals or perfect resize. And the AI Gigapixel software isn't, for my money, does the very best job of blowing this up. I'm really very pleased to be able to use it. And at the end of this webinar, I'll show you a few bits about it, and maybe Heath will also do some demonstrations. Okay, let's move to this image, which I have prepared here on in Photoshop. This is more or less the way it came out of my camera. And I'm going to wait for the screen to catch up with me. So I showed you a minute ago the final version of this image, which you can see was nice and glowy. And here's more or less the way it came out of my camera, which is a good bit darker and has less luminance than before. My favorite go-to preset to adjust that in Topaz, and still with a realistic effect, is within Topaz Adjust. So to make that happen, here I am in Photoshop. What I do is I duplicate my layer, duplicate layer, and then I invoke Topaz Studio. And from within Topaz Studio, I'm going to start up the Adjust plugin. As you may know, when you're in Topaz Studio, on the plugins menu, you'll find all the plugins that you have that aren't available through Studio. So I'm starting Topaz Adjust right there. And the preset that I recommend for this purpose, for the first, is Exposure Color Stretch. Because what this does is it takes the colors, lightens them, and makes them more brilliant in whatever direction they are. It exaggerates the exposure. So here I am in the Adjust interface. You can see that I have this preset up. If I'd like to, I can make it a little brighter. I can play with, increase the contrast or lower the contrast. But I don't really need to do too much with the sliders. And I click OK. And then once I'm back in Studio, I click OK again. And what you now have in Photoshop is, if you look on your channels palette, your layers palette, excuse me, I'm typing adjust color stretch into the layers palette for the layer that I added. So what you can see here is that I can take this layer off and on, and as I take it off and on, you'll see that the top layer is much lighter than the bottom layer, and also is much more contrast and vibrant. But I don't want it overall because I like my sky in this image kind of dark and lowery. So I go layer mask, layer hide all, and I'm back to my original image because my black layer mask has hid the Topaz adjust exposure color stretch layer. And what I can do is I can take a paintbrush, which is nice and floppy, put white on my paintbrush and paint it in selectively, perhaps about like that off the sides. And as you can see, I'm doing it. I'm getting a nice glow through parts of the image in the sky. I don't want it completely. I just want enough to give a nice sense of luminance in the sky. So that's the way I get an image like this to look. It's to look as both a realistic photograph and also as a wonderful and sort of edible view of the New York skyline as you could possibly want. If you take off the eyeball for the layer, you can see that's where we started. This is more or less how it came out of the camera, and that's where it is after I add an exposure adjust, an exposure color stretch adjust preset on it. All right, one more time, I'm going to take that off, put it on, and I will also show what this layer mask looks like. This is the layer mask that I painted in. It paints in white for the sides of the city and a little bit for the sky, but not a lot for the sky. It more or less leaves the cars alone. Now, suppose I want to get more detail in the headlights that have become these elongated lights here. Well, the way I would do that is I would take my background layer and I would duplicate it again, layer, duplicate layer. I bring my duplicate layer up to the top of my layer stack in Photoshop, and I'm going to run adjust on this again. But this time I'm going to pick a different preset so that I can do something specifically for the cars there. The software says, I've seen this before. Let me see how fast I can process it. Oh, thank you, software. So I'm pulling up adjust again. And this time I'm going to go to Detail Strong 2. I click OK to accept it. And I click OK again. So now I have 3 layers, and the top one is Detail Strong 2. But of course, that doesn't look so good on the sky. And so what I do is I put another hide all layer mask on it, layer, layer mask, hide all, and I start painting in the car trails. We're going to do it a little more strongly here than I would probably do it in real life, just to just to make the point across. There it is. Here they are painted in. And once it catches up with me, here is the layer mask that I painted in for the part of the Brooklyn Bridge where the cars are. All right, let's move on to another example. I'm going to close this one out. So this is Son Doong Cave in central Vietnam, the world's largest cave. Fewer people have been here than have been into outer space, so it's not an easy place to get to. This is a 5 exposure blend on a tripod looking out toward one of the openings in the cave, which in some ways are the most fantastic thing about it. And as you can look at this image, you can see that it's a little bit dull. So there's no reason why we can't treat it with the very same adjustment. So layer, duplicate layer, filter. I'm starting Topaz Studio again. So actually, I'm not going to do anything too radical to this one. I'm just going to apply one exposure color stretch layer to it. And it's going to become very much like the finished image you saw in the postcard for this webinar once I do. So here you go. So with this image, I'm waiting for it to catch up with me, but basically I just have one layer on top, which is the exposure color stretch, and one layer on the bottom. So here's where I started: dark, dull, and kind of intriguing. So when I turn it on, this is the way it looks with the exposure color stretch preset. Most likely I would take the opacity of this down to about maybe 60%. So it's good to play with the opacity slider after you put on a preset on a separate layer. So once again, here's the final version, and here's where we started. And interestingly, to make this kind of correction on this image is a matter of about 10 seconds. It doesn't take very long. Let me, Heath, are you there? Did I show enough of before and after on this one?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Good. Okay, let me move on to another Topaz plugin and another kind of image. Let us do this image. So I've been working lately to make X-ray photos of flowers. This is using actual medical X-ray equipment. What I would want to do with this image, which is of a flower, I think it's a dahlia, is I want to make it both sort of firmer and more apparent, and also softer in the petals as well. So I'm going to use 2 of the presets within Topaz Simplify to make that happen. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go layer, duplicate layer, and I can pull up Topaz Simplify on the menu here, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by A to Z, and I'm going to go down to Z to the wood carving preset, which is one I like a lot. And I'm going to pick it. So what we have here is wood carving. And just before I do the next layer on this, stop for a second and look how what we have here is so sharp and pasted in that you can really see all these details. It makes it a very, very different image. But on the other hand, it is also taken away the softness that one also wants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my background layer again, layer, duplicate layer, and I'm going to bring it to the top, and I'm going to run simplify on it again.
Now it's worth noting that if you don't have Photoshop, you can still do the same thing that you're doing with these, with loading Simplify. So if you don't have a way to go into the Simplify menu, the workflow menu that'll be on the left has an entry for Simplify. If you click that, it will bring you right to this layout.
So within Simplify, there are quite a few number of options as to how to soften and treat things. But what I'm going to use here is what may be the oldie but goldie Buzz Sim, which is really a great preset for softening things. So here's a Buzz Sim layer. And let me make this a little bigger first of all. What you probably don't want to do is use this completely throughout. So I'm going to put a layer mask, layer mask hide all on here. And I'm going to put my brush at about 70%. And I am going to paint some of it in. So the combination of hard and soft, it's like a martial art that's both hard and soft. What we have here is Photoshop painting that's both hard and soft. The combination is really cool, and tends to be what I would present as a final image on this as I make some prints of some of my X-ray work. Just to show you what the layer mask is, here's the layer mask that I just painted. It's a partial layer mask, doesn't cover the whole areas, but does cover pretty much. And just to go back to the beginning, here's where this image started. Here's adding some wood carving to toughen it up. Here's adding some Buzz Sim to soften it up and make those petals nice and soft. All right, let's move on to another example. I'm starting with this one from the raw file, actually, so you can see for yourself. This is just the way it came out of my camera. It's an in-camera multiple exposure. I wouldn't do very much to it. I might up the saturation a bit. I bring it into Photoshop from Adobe Camera Raw. If you're coming in from Lightroom, it's the same difference. Doesn't make any difference. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to crop it down, because we don't really need to see that this is a studio setup. We just want the multiple exposure figure here. And I'm also going to just to make this move a little faster, I'm going to take my resolution down a bit for the purpose of this demo. Of course, in real life, you don't do that. You leave your resolution as high as you can, as long as you can, until you make a master image. And then if you want to take it down, you do. So my thought here is that this is a figure study. The red hat may be the most important part of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it look a little like perhaps a Degas painting of a figure, of a dancer. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate my layer, and I'm going to run Topaz impression on it. And let's see. There are a number of Degas dancers, but I think I know which one I want. I think I want the first one here, because that's the most realistic one, really. So I'm going to take Giga Dancers 1, and this is okay, but my problem here is that I actually would like to see the face of the dancer here a little bit more. So everything else about it I like, but I'd like to see a little more of the face. So what I do is I'm going to put a reveal all white layer mask on, and I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to put some black on my brush, and I'm going to paint it at 100% opacity, a little bit smaller brush, and that way I have my face and my hat back the way it was before I applied the impression filter. So just to show you what I did here, and again, this is really pretty simple and straightforward. Here's where I started, following opening it up in Photoshop, and here's the Giga Dancer preset as it comes out of the box. And I put on a white reveal all layer mask and painted out the face so that I could get have a sort of realistic face and hat in otherwise an impressionistic image. Right, let me move on to another example. Here's another one that you can see is right out of the box. My thought here with this image is that what I'd like to do is keep the center of this cone flower fairly sharp, but make the petals more impressionistic and impressionistic. So the contrast would be between the petals, which are already not totally sharp, and the center, which is pretty sharp. The camera must have been pretty up close to the center of this cone flower. So I go layer, duplicate layer, and within Topaz Studio, I'm going to go to impression again. And there again are many possibilities that one could choose from. I also want to point out about the presets that I've been showing in this session that these are all simple to apply. Each one of these things is really a couple of minutes work. It's not a big deal. You can see how relatively quickly I've been doing this. The one that I have picked out here is called Impression Chalk. I think that's what it's called. Let me just see. So, you could do abstraction 1 perfectly well. There are many possibilities here. Well, I think let's try Chalk Smudge. It's a cool one anyhow. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Okay, now this is really a pretty nice effect, but as it is, but remember my idea here was to keep the center sharp and the outside smudgy. So to do that, I do a layer mask, layer mask, reveal all. I take my brush, I make sure the foreground color is black. I get a brush that's sized roughly for my image. And I start painting in the parts of the image that I don't want to be smudged. Okay, so to recapitulate here, the layer mask looks like this. It's just the reverse of the center of the cone flower. Without that layer at all, we have a fairly straight image of a cone flower that's mostly in focus. Putting it on, we've got a soft impressionistic petals around a sharp center of a cone flower and something that approaches a artistic rendition of this flower. I'm going to move on to another example at this point. What I thought I would show would be a couple of texture effects. So Here's a nice image of a castle. Let me take this down in size so that it will move a little faster. And I'm going to duplicate my layer. And let's run texture effects on this. One thing that's neat about the texture effects plugin is that you can roll through a pretty big library of textures and see what they do without having to actually apply them. One of the issues with applying texture overlays to images is that until you actually try it on top, you don't often know what it is. With this, you can sort of look at a lot of them quickly and get a pretty good idea as to what they might likely do. So, I mean, for example, this and where you want to go with this is really going to depend on what you want. For example, for some uses, this landscape watercolor texture is nice. This feel of texture is also a very different look, but nice. And what I'm going to put though is, well, let's see. That's nice. I'm going to put on the 1950s print. I'm going to turn this into a 1950s sort of steel point image, which is what it looks like with this preset. So this one was called 1950s print texture. There it is off, here it is on, and the only thing I would say about this is if I were going to present this as a final work or print it, I would want to look carefully at some of the areas like this right here and consider very easily perhaps retouching them out by going something like edit, fill, content aware, and bingo, you don't have to worry about it. So that's an issue of choice when and sometimes with textures it depends how they apply and how they feel. Again, here's where I started with this. Not a bad image, an interesting castle. There may have been all kinds of things going on with this castle in history. This happens to be in the Transylvania section of Romania, incidentally. And here's a texture overlay. There are many other possible looks you can get right out of this texture overlay. So let me go to another example of textures. Textures can often work very nicely with landscapes. Here's one from the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I'm also going to cut this down so that, well, it won't take a lot of time to do things. Image size, and we'll make it a little smaller. Layer mask. Let me first duplicate my layer, and I'm going to go into texture effects. Once again, with a landscape like this, there are many possible looks that you can get by applying a texture over the top of the image. And one of the interesting things, by the way, about the texture effect plugin is that you can load your own texture files into here also to use it for preview. That's still right, Heath, isn't it?
Yes, sir. You can load them in. As a matter of fact, it's pretty easy to do that if you want a demo. I know a bunch of people are going to ask that right away. Do you know how to run that through?
Okay, well, I think I do, but let me just apply one here first, and then we can. Oh, actually, okay. You want to talk me through that, Heath?
Yeah, it's real easy. Just go to the texture adjustment that you see right there on the right, and click the down arrow. Either one, it doesn't matter. In the image list. Yep. All right, and then you see that little icon right next to category all. All you need to do is click that icon, and then your texture importer will come up. Then you want to select the category that you'd like to import your textures to. You can create a new category by hitting this button, name it whatever you'd like. Cool. Enter. And then once you click on my category, you'll click import, and then you can select whatever your image files are, and they'll load in there. This is you've still got the weather category selected, but anything you select will add there. And then all you have to do is in the category drop down, go to my category, and those will show after you've got them imported.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all right. You don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to show the.
I have more textures.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Well, you can see that this one is pretty cool. It's a different look. Actually, that 1950s print was too. In fact, almost every texture in the library here is something different that's pretty cool. The landscape oil isn't bad. A lot of this depends on exactly what you want. And that's, so the eye becomes as important as using the technology, really. And as you can see, there are quite a lot here.
Yeah, as you scroll through, it's trying to load them in, and you're actually searching on public now too. One of the cool features about Topaz Studio is the community. Any preset that you make, you can share. So a lot of these that you're pulling in are presets that other users have made that decided to share with the. Yeah, if you turn it off, it'll just be Topaz effects and effects that you create.
Is what, yeah. So that's actually an interesting thing that I just learned the other day, really. And that is that you can turn off and on the business of whether Topaz is showing everybody's effects or just the ones that come canned with Topaz, and there are things to be said either way on that. If you leave the public switch on, you can see all kinds of possibilities that you might not otherwise have seen. On the other hand, if you turn it off, things load faster and you get the ones that are sort of factory approved. The only thing about that I'd say is that you just need to know that switch is there. Fair summary, Heath?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. The mute button's really small for me, so it takes me a little while to find it.
No, not a problem. So this is the breaking through one, and what it does is it puts these rays of light on the thing, and I move the opacity of the whole layer down to 50%. I like the effect. It's different anyhow. So here's where I started with this sunrise landscape in the Eastern Sierras, and here's what it looks like with the rays going through. Okay. So if you're going to show AI Gigapixel, this might not be a bad time, but let me open it up and run an example through it if I could.
Yeah, of course. I'll get set up with the latest build too.
Okay. Okay, good. What I often find is that if you really have a small piece of an image and you want to make it larger, that this is a really good way to go. So let's see. So you remember this image. So remember we cropped in. Well, let's say I want to make it bigger by 200%. I just go. I click how much bigger I want to make it. I'll make sure the scale button's done. Click go ahead, and it puts it in the same location as the original file, but with the word output after the file.
Worth mentioning here that Gigapixel is doing 1 to 2 million calculations per pixel in your image. So it can take quite a bit of time, as you can see here, even though we're going 200%, it's taken a little bit of time to process. Something that I'll be showing is right now it's in beta, but coming very soon we'll have version 2.0, which depending on the size of your image can be anywhere from 2 to 6 times faster to process an image than the original version of AI Gigapixel version 1. So I'm getting that set up right now.
Heath, I can't wait for that. Just to clarify, if people get the current software, will they be entitled to get the upgrade as well?
Yeah, all of our software comes with free updates for life. That means if you bought, as right now we're on Gigapixel v1.1.2, we're not like Photoshop where you got to pay every time we come up with a different CS version. If you buy Gigapixel version 1 and 10 years from now we're on version 10, you get version 10 along with your purchase for 1. You get free updates for life on any of the individual products that you own. There's been some confusion with things like the bundles. A lot of our bundles are adaptive, so as we add new products, those products get added to certain bundles. You don't get, let's say you buy a bundle that has 4 products in it and then it's 14 products. You don't get the other 10 products for free, but you can upgrade your bundle by purchasing it again and you won't be charged for what you already own. So I don't know of very many software companies that do that. That's one of the promises one of our founder and CEO wanted to make, Albert. He decided that he got sick of buying software and then somebody doing some minor bug fixes and him having to pay for access to those. So with Topaz products, if you buy anything, you get free updates for life on any of the products that you own.
And specifically, AI Gigapixel is a single product, so the bundling business won't be involved with that.
Yep, that is correct.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, this is going to take a while. I think I'm not sure how much point there is to.
That's fine. If we want to transition over to me, because I know we're getting close to questions, then I can show Gigapixel and the impression, the masking in Studio, I think was the other thing. Give me just 1 second, because I'm trying to get the version of 2.0 installed. Do you want to go ahead and switch to questions? There's actually a way you can cancel this. Right now in this version, if you hit cancel, it's got to finish processing the image before it will actually stop the process. But if you click that red button in the upper left-hand corner, it'll kill the whole program. So it stops all the processes and everything else.
Okay, it's dead. Right. It does a good job though. It may take a while, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that's why it's not part of Studio. It takes a long time to process an image, and that's why we built it as a batching application instead of an adjustment, because you don't want to be sitting there waiting for your adjustment to finish so you can continue working.
All right, let me take some questions while Heath is teeing this up.
The first question that we got was pretty much the same thing that we always get anytime you show masking, is how did you make a gray mask for the sky in your image that you're showing right now when you were processing that? Can you show a little bit of the masking that you were doing in Photoshop, and then I'll cover how to do it in Studio.
Sure. Let's go back to that image. And I'm just going to run through this again because I think that's the easiest way to do it. Duplicate layer. And I'm going to run Topaz Studio on it. And I tell you what, this time instead of making that kind of adjustment, since we're just talking about layer masks here, let me pick something else from the menu here to make our point. Let's do bright night, and that sounds like a lot of fun to me. Okay. So I think the question was, how do I selectively mask an area in Photoshop? And Photoshop has 2 kinds of masks in them. There are black masks that hide the layer that it's associated with, and white masks that reveal. Sometimes people remember the rhyme, black conceals and white reveals, because that's appropriate to Photoshop. Let's, for the sake of this, let's put a black layer mask on, and that's called a hide all layer mask, and it's black. So then you're painting on the layer mask, and when you paint on the layer mask with white, it reveals what's beneath it. So something that's totally white reveals it completely. Something that's totally black hides it completely. Something that's 50% gray, 50% shows it. So what the two main tools you use for painting on it are the paintbrush and the gradient tool. They're both pretty simple to use, but the paintbrush is probably really the easiest. So in the tools panel, you select the paintbrush tool. I'm doing that right now. And you also make sure that your foreground color is set to white, which you do on the color picker down at the bottom of the tools panel. Then you set the width of your brush like this, and you set the amount of opacity for the flow, and you paint in where you want it to go white. So right here, I'm painting in this bright night preset, which actually looks pretty good on this image, I must say. It's almost turning it into a night image. So what I've done is I've used the painting tools built into Photoshop to create a mask, and here's what the mask looks like. And the areas on the mask that are black hide the part of the Topaz preset that won't show in the final image, and the image and the parts of it that are white show the final part that is going to be in the final image. So here's where I started, here's where I ended, and basically to use these techniques of masking, and this is going to be true no matter what software it is, whether it's Topaz Studio, Photoshop, or some other program that lets you mask, lets you pinpoint what areas you want to show and what areas you want to hide when you use some kind of preset adjustment. Thanks for the question. Is there another question, or Keith, are you ready?
I'm going to transfer it back to me, but the other question that we got is someone was wondering what lens you used to take this image.
You know, this is on a tripod, because you have to be on a tripod to do a motion shot like this. Otherwise you'll be crazy. But I use the Nikkor 28 to 300 millimeter zoom lens at about 28 millimeters. Not a fancy lens, basically.
I really like the distortion it's giving you, though. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take the screen back, and I will show my screen. And before we do anything else, I want to go ahead and mention the masking in Studio. You saw Harold doing a lot of masking in Photoshop. So right now I have an image. You're one of the people who inspired me. I went to Japan earlier this year, and I found this in some little garden and just decided to take a picture of these photos. So this is what I have directly out of, now this is from my cell phone. I've got a ZTE Axon 7. So this is directly out of my cell phone. I'm going to go ahead and apply the chalk smudge preset to that. You can see what it's done to my image here. You can always see a before and after by hitting the space bar. So that's my original. This is my after. Now, if you use something like you can see here, that impression, this effect only has one adjustment, impression. Because it has one adjustment, we have adjustment level masking available right here. All you have to do is click this, and it'll open up your masks. It works much the same way. I can use a spot mask, gradient mask, brush mask. What you were using is brush masking, and just like you said, black conceals and white reveals. Because we don't have that brush transparency, what I'm going to do is set this brush right here at a 0.7. That's the same as a 70% opacity. Take the radius up just a little bit. You can see that growing, and then I'm going to go ahead and start brushing this out. You can see I'm starting to bring those flowers back, just the center of those flowers, with a soft edge. I can paint that wherever I like.
And Heath, the white thumbnail on the right is showing the actual mask you're making, correct?
That is correct. There's no way within Photoshop this version to do what you were doing and showing the mask on the image. However, I have a workaround for that I wanted to show as well. So now that I'm done with my mask, I'm going to hit done. Now, if you've been in Studio for a while, you'll notice that every single one of the adjustments, if you scroll down to the bottom, has this little enhance button. And if you click it, it'll show you the whole adjustment list, anything else you can add. What this does is it effectively adds another adjustment that only affects the adjustment before it. So if I have done masking, like I've done on this image, anything I add underneath this, and for this instance, I'm going to add a color overlay, will only affect this with the way this is masked. So if I were to make this mask black, you would see that, and actually I'll do this in a second just to show you. I'm going to take this color overlay, and just so to make it where you can see the mask, I'll use, let's just make it blue, kind of a, what do you think? maybe this pink color. No, orange. There we go. And I'll turn that up a little bit, so now you can see the orange showing through. And you can see that even though this color overlay isn't masked, because it's part of that impression adjustment, the masking that I've done here is also affecting that layer. So I will go ahead and reset this. So now you can see it's full. And if I do masking with the brush, I'm going to go ahead and paint black just for the dramatic sake. You can paint this in, and now you can see on your screen where the mask is affecting your image. And if I want to turn that off to just see what it looks like on my actual image, I can scroll down here and just hit the eye icon. And that's basically how masking in Studio works. It works similar to Photoshop. The only difference here is you don't have to make a layer. If you did want to use that layered workflow, you have another option as well. I'm just going to delete this adjustment, and then I'll click on Chalk Smudge as well. You noticed what Harold was doing was applying the adjustment effectively to this layer and then masking in Photoshop. You can do that as well in Studio. Just hit the Apply button, and it will flatten all of this into a new image right here. Then I can take this image, go back to my original, delete this, and now I have my original image. I can click on the flattened image right here, drag it into my adjustment layer, and then I effectively have stacked that layer on top of the other, and I can do masking just like I would have before. I'll make that 0.7 and make this a little bit bigger and come in here and paint this away. And you can see that starting to remove that. I'm going to make it a little bit more just so you can kind of really see how that works. And there you go. The exact same effect, and you don't have to have Photoshop or Lightroom to get this done. I know that that's your traditional workflow. You've worked that way a long time, Harold, and that's why you prefer that. Yeah, Photoshop is a great tool. It has a lot of masking that we don't quite have in Studio yet, but you still have a lot of flexibility within Studio to get the very similar, if not the exact same looks.
I can see how flexible this is, and it's really interesting to see it as a, there's no reason for simple things not to just use it.
If you guys like to follow Harold, he has a lot of great presentations. He has a lot of great art, and he loves hearing from you. You can always visit his website at digitalfieldguide.com. You can also email him at harold@photoblog2.com. That's still good, right, Harold?
It sure is.
All right. You can follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/davis.harold. On Twitter.
I'm not on Facebook anymore.
You're not on Facebook anymore. I need to update that then. Still on Twitter and Flickr, though?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Then you can follow him at Twitter at Harold_Davis or flickr.com/Harold_Davis. If you have any questions, you can always contact our support team directly at webinars@topazlabs.com, and you can sign up for upcoming webinars. I think we've got one on the docket for October 2nd. It's Pure Fun with Topaz presented by Joel Wolfson. You guys can sign up for that at topazlabs.com/webinars. We came up a little bit over time, but I think you had some great things to show. I really like you sharing more about your process, Harold. And let's not let it be another year before we see you again. We need to get you back on the calendar.
I'd like that very much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot too. So it's a great thing. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And be sure to hit us up if you have any questions.